My son patted my shoulder at the office and said, "Why don't you retire already, old man? You're just in my way," while his colleagues nodded along. But when the board voted me chairman again, his smile disappeared. His career ended. They were all watching, and maybe you are too, from a bus, a couch, a chair at your night shift break. If you are, tell me where you're watching from, because that's how this kind of story begins. Someone looks away for a second, and someone else takes the chance to push. It happened at 8:47 a.m., the hour when coffee still lets off steam, and screens have that cold blue that makes everyone seem more awake than they really are. My son came up behind me in the open plan office, the floor that faces the city and the river, where the light makes our glass walls look like a stage. He patted my shoulder like a coach patting a bench warmer. "Why don't you retire already, old man? You're in my way." He said it softly, but he didn't want it to be private. He wanted the sound to travel. Two of his colleagues, young and polished and eager to belong, nodded as if they had been waiting for their cue. I didn't turn around. I watched a quarterly dashboard rotate through numbers I had looked at for 30 years. Inventory days, cash conversion, uptime. We built those numbers in nights and storms, and all the small decisions no one will ever post about. "Noted," I said. "The way you tell a mechanic you hear the rattle, but you're not going to panic about it. If you've seen something like this, you know the temperature of the room drops a degree." It did now. Even the printer seemed to pause between pages. He tried again, a little louder, like he wanted to make sure the people by the huddle room could catch the joke. "We need speed," he said, "not nostalgia." The pause before the last word landed like a coin on a glass table. The colleagues did that laugh that isn't a laugh, just a quick throat noise for social safety. I kept my eyes on the screen in front of me, the chart sliding from Q1 to Q2 like a tide line. "Be careful with speed, Rayan," I said, using his name in that even voice my wife used to say sounded like the low part of a drum. "Brakes matter on steep roads." He didn't answer. He didn't understand that was me being kind. A junior analyst hurried over with a visitor lanyard, flustered, cheeks bright. "Sir, she said, then saw my badge and swallowed. I took the lanyard and handed it back to her gently. "You'll be fine," I said. "Just breathe." She nodded too fast, grateful to be noticed at all, in a room that took its orders from whoever spoke in bullet points. Rayan didn't miss that either. He shifted his smile and walked away, shoulders squared, the way young men do when they're sure the floor belongs to them. I took a slow lap past the founder's wall to make sure my hands didn't shake. It's a corridor no one stops at anymore, but it keeps the story honest. A photo of me and 3 engineers in a rented garage that smelled like dust and sugar because a bakery was next door. A ribbon from the first product launch faded to a kind of brave brown. A printout of a purchase order that made us all cheer because it meant we could pay ourselves something that month and still make rent on the server closet. The plaque with my name has a scratch down the middle now from a clumsy move last year. I like the scratch. It makes it look less like a shrine and more like a tool. I still carry the brass key to that old server closet on my keychain. No one needs it, but things that built you don't stop being useful just because the doors they opened are gone. I touch the key, then the leather folder on my desk with my wife's initials pressed into the corner, just once with my thumb. An email pinged on my screen with the tone we chose years ago. A soft bell. Agenda. Extraordinary board meeting, 4 p.m. Topic. Leadership continuity. People think that in those moments your heart thunders like a herd. Mine didn't. It was a steady metronome. I have always done my best work after the biggest insults. Not because I love conflict, because insult clears the fog. If you have ever worked in a place that's pretending to be a future museum, you know the way words turn into badges. Velocity. Disruption. Fearless. Lately, the newer leaders wore those words like custom suits. The older hands, the men and women who held the plant line together during a flood that took out half our supply chain, still use the older words. Stewardship, safety, quiet fix. It's an old argument in business. How much of the past is a map, and how much is an anchor? I founded this company because I believed the past was a compass and a battery. You point it to true north, and it gives you power. Rayan came 5 years ago with a good MBA and a good smile, polished like a new coin. My wife, God rest her, told me to try to see him not as my son walking into my house, but as a young leader walking into a place that existed before he was born. She believed in him and in me, and in the space between us, we'd learn a better way. I believed her, and I tried. She'd been right about more things than I can count. She was right that we'd both have to learn. She was wrong about the time we'd have to learn it. You'll ask, maybe in the comments, why I didn't turn to him right then and lay down the law a father can lay down. Because I am not just a father, I am an employee and a founder and a chair who answers to a charter. I wrote when my beard was darker and my eyes slept more. Because yelling feels strong and accomplishes almost nothing. Because I promised a woman in a hospital room, holding my hand so softly I thought it would break me, that I would keep the soul of this company even if it meant keeping my son at a distance for a time. I didn't know this morning would be that time, but here we were. The floor was a stage, and he had delivered the line he thought would get applause. He got some. He mistook it for the whole room. That happens to bright men when they're applauded too young. I stepped into the elevator to go down to the plant because steel and belts and oil have always told me the truth better than slides. The mirror in the elevator door caught me. White at the temples, lines at the eyes that come from squinting at spreadsheets more than from smiling. For a beat, I saw a different image. Her behind me, lifting up on her toes to smooth my hair before our first investor pitch years ago. "You'll forget to eat," she said, tucking a sandwich into my bag. "Don't forget to breathe." She had a shawl she loved, light wool the color of the lake in winter. She would wrap it around her shoulders on the balcony when I came home late, and I would stand behind her and breathe the pine the air carried at night. The shawl is in my office now, folded over the back of a chair, the way she used to fold it over herself. When people ask what I miss, they think I will say big things. I miss the small ones, the way she would flick a crumb with her nail, the way she wrote lists in a neat slanted hand, the way she said my name like it had a beginning and a place to arrive. The elevator doors opened and I went to the floor where the machines talk. You need to understand that the company lives there, not in the corner offices and not in the town halls. It lives where a woman in an orange vest looks at a dial and knows something's wrong from the sound before the number moves. It lives where a man wraps tape around his fingers before a shift, because he doesn't want to bleed into the harness if a clip snaps in the wrong place. It lives in the line cook at the plant cafeteria, who knows which forklift driver has been working through lunch 3 days straight and puts an extra spoon of beans on his plate whether he asks for it or not. I walk the line, hands behind my back, not because I like to look grand, but because that's how I keep from touching. I ask names because names are a currency, and most people pay attention cheaper. A young engineer named Priya showed me a small fix in the circuit that would save us 3 seconds per unit and a lot of rework. She did it with the kind of careful pride you should pay with your whole attention. "Who greenlit this pilot?" I asked. She looked down. "He did," she said, meaning Rayon, but his team said to move fast, so we, didn't put it through the old approvals. She didn't like saying that. She was too good to like it. I looked at the board above us, filled with colored tape and boxes, and the word approved printed in letters that have kept us out of court for years. "Let's do both," I said. "Keep the fix. Do the paperwork. If anyone asks, tell them the chairman asked you to teach him the new way, while we keep the good parts of the old way." She smiled like someone had turned her chair toward the window. When I got back upstairs, the extra email was waiting in my inbox like a cat that found a warm engine. The governance committee wanted to make sure all directors would be present by 4. The subject line used the word continuity, which is a careful word used when what you mean is change, but you don't want the market to taste blood. I wrote back a single line: "I will attend." Then I picked up the leather folder, opened it, and looked at the documents inside without pulling them fully free. There are 2 kinds of paper in a company: the paper you show and the paper you keep in a safe place for when the weather turns. This folder held the second kind. I put it back. I don't make a habit of waving umbrellas to threaten rain. You bring an umbrella because you don't want anyone to get wet. My office is not large. I chose that on purpose. Founders who build throne rooms forget the rooms they started from. I have a desk, a plant that has outlived 3 receptionists, a window that frames a triangle of river and road, and that shawl over the chair. Sometimes, when the floor outside gets too loud with laughing that sounds like a drill chewing metal, I touch the shawl and remember the balcony at the lake. My wife would stand leaning forward a little, like the view could fall if she didn't take care of it. "Build something that outlasts you," she told me once. On a night I came home with worry in my shoes, but don't let it outgrow its soul. I didn't understand then what the second half would cost. I do now. I have paid interest on that line for years, skipping birthdays, a trip we planned and canceled twice, anniversaries I promised to make up for when things calm down. They never calm down on their own. You have to bring the temperature down yourself. I don't want to make my son a villain in this story. He is my son. There are pictures of him asleep on my chest while I typed code one-handed. There is a memory of him at 13 telling a joke so bad we laughed until our sides hurt, and my wife whispering to me, "He takes after you." There's a photograph in a drawer somewhere of the day he started here. New suit, too tight in the shoulders, eyes bright with a particular hunger that can make a person brave or cruel depending on what they feed it. I fed it faith. I also fed it caution. "You are an employee," I told him that first week, "not a prince." He said he understood. People often understand when they're not yet sure they want the power. Understanding is easy without the key in your hand. I walked the floor again near noon, because movement keeps the mind from sticking to the same page. The executive dining room sits beside a wall of glass, and at certain hours it looks like a fishbowl of black suits and silver cutlery. Someone had set place cards out, and mine was missing. "We moved to rotational seating," a coordinator said too, quickly, with a smile that didn't hold. I told her she was doing fine, and she was. It's not her job to get stuck between men who share a last name and a fight. I took soup at the corner of the canteen instead, and listened to the chop of knives and trays sliding. Rayon's voice carried a little, even there, clean and bright like a commercial. He was talking about a pilot without legacy approvals, and the phrasing got a polite laugh from the table nearest him. I drank water and felt my jaw work once, then smooth. I don't own the room where he was, and the people in it need to believe in the person who signs their projects. I have learned not to puncture a balloon in a crowd. You let it float to a ceiling where you can reach it safely. On the way back to my office, I passed the glass corridor again, the one with our old photos. A new hire was there, looking at the grainy garage picture. He glanced at me, then back at the picture, then back at me, trying to match the hairline to the smile. "That was a good day," I said. "We got a purchase order to the same afternoon and ate pizza from a place that doesn't exist anymore." He grinned and said he'd heard the story from a mentor. "Welcome," I said. It is important that a new hire hears welcome from somewhere other than HR. The word doesn't cost you, and it buys you a culture. Back at my desk, the plant was thirsty and I watered it from the glass I had been drinking from, the way I always do. I opened the top drawer and slid my hand over the small keypad that unlocks the safe built into the side panel. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet doesn't mean never. It means timing. I took out a slim envelope anyway, just to feel the weight of it in my hand. The seal was unbroken, the paper thick. I read the first line of the cover letter the way a soldier might check the edge of a blade. Stewardship mechanisms shall activate upon material threat to governance integrity. I put it away, shut the panel, pressed the edge to hear the soft click. Then I polished my glasses with the corner of the shawl because I wanted to see the next hour clearly. I called 2 directors, not to argue, not to beg, but to inform them I would be present and that I expected we would read the charter we all approved with the same care we had used to write it. The first said yes, we would. The second said she would bring a note she had made last year, something about leadership covenants and humiliation. Good, I said. Clarity helps everyone. How do you keep from shouting when your own blood throws a public stone? You remember which person you are in the scene, father, founder, chair employee, steward. The words can pull against each other until they tear you in half, or they can braid into a rope. I chose the rope. I chose the flat voice my wife used to joke could level a room more gently than a hammer, and I wrote 3 sentences on the back of a business card so I wouldn't be tempted to add anything when the time came. I said them out loud once to the empty room, the way you test a bridge with your own weight before you let anyone else step on it. Outside, the city light pulled itself up into early afternoon, and the floor started buzzing for the 4 p.m. performance everyone pretends is just a meeting. If you're still with me, tell me in a word where you are. Bus, couch, break room, because I want you to feel the floorboards under my shoes the way I did. They were steady. I was steady. The stage was set without me touching a single curtain. The courier showed up at my door with a white box and a grin that tried to be neutral and failed. He didn't know he was part of a scene. He only knew someone told him to carry a cake with my name piped in shaky blue, the kind of frosting that leaves your tongue the color of a bruise. "Congratulations on your next chapter," the sticker said, like a fortune cookie that thinks it's a judge. I signed, thanked him, and set the box on the low table by the window. Outside, the river dragged a thin silver wake behind a barge. Inside, the air went a notch quieter, the way it does before a thunderclap. People walking past my glass wall pretended not to look and looked anyway, heads angled, mouths set to polite. If you've seen this moment in your own life, tell me what the cake looked like. Mine was a bland circle, like a decision made by a committee that feared flavor. I took the knife from my drawer, cut a clean slice, and carried it to the receptionist, who'd been fielding calls since 8. "Thank you for keeping the chaos sorted," I said. She laughed from surprise, then pressed her lips together like laughter wasn't allowed. Thank you." I took my own slice back to the office, ate 2 small bites, and tasted nothing at all. I threw the rest away, washed the plate, and left the knife in the rack to dry. Near the coffee station, the finance lead caught my eye and missed on purpose. He stirred an empty cup with a wooden stick. "Big day," he said, voice too bright, like a light bulb running on a current it wasn't built for. "We believe in clarity." I nodded. "We do," I said. "Clarity keeps people safe." He swallowed and checked his watch like it owed him an answer. HR came by an hour later and asked how I was holding up. I told her the truth. "Clarity helps everyone," I said. She studied my face for the edges of anger and didn't find them. Anger had moved on. I had something colder than anger and more useful. It lives behind the voice you learn when your first investor threatens to pull and you still have to make payroll on Friday. It doesn't shake. It doesn't boast. It holds the door open to the truth and lets the truth walk in at its own pace. Rayon was careful to be casual. He staged small freeze-outs the way a magician palms a coin, not to disappear it, but to make the audience look at his other hand. A strategy dinner, the night before that, my calendar somehow never received. A group chat named Future Ops that tagged me only when a deliverable was already shipped. A memo that talked about legacy drag and approval choke points and called a veteran plant manager by the wrong name on purpose. These things are pebbles in the shoe. You can walk for miles with them until one morning your foot bleeds and you don't know which step did it. He said the word pilot with teeth. He said, without legacy approvals in front of the table that still thinks applause can make a problem true. The people who nodded along weren't villains. They were kids who wanted to be on the team that wins. He made them believe speed was winning. He forgot to tell them about corners and trucks and brakes. I spent the early afternoon tidying what looked like clutter, but was not. I laid out 3 pens, the good ones that don't hesitate on thick paper. I took off my glasses and polished them with the edge of her shawl. The wool is soft with the years. It remembers her shape even folded, the curve of her shoulder in the arc where the light sits lighter. "You'll forget to eat," she told me before the first pitch, placing a sandwich in my bag. "Don't forget to breathe." I breathed. I wrote 3 sentences on the back of a business card, one under the other, with space between them like steps on a stair. I read them aloud once in the empty room, to hear how they landed, to know if any word was showing off. None were. I slid the card into the pocket of my wallet behind an old bus ticket I keep as a joke on myself. Buses and boardrooms take you somewhere. One will tell you the truth faster. When you build something that matters, you make 2 kinds of plans. The first for growth, the second for storms. The second kind lives in quiet places. After my wife died, I sat on the balcony with the shawl around my shoulders because I wanted to borrow her warmth. The lake was flat and dark and honest. I wrote a letter to myself that night and put it in the safe. Later, with counsel and care, I turned the letter into rules. We named it after her because I needed a name that would steady my hand. The Anaya Stewardship Trust. It holds voting shares with a switch built into the bylaws. The switch is simple. If stewardship is threatened, not by competitors, not by markets, but by vanity or humiliation from within, the trust can call for a vote, lock down reckless authority, and return control to a chair bound to the charter. 2 independent fiduciaries guard it. Their names aren't on the walls, and they prefer it that way. They sign only when the clause is clean and the weather is real. We got the board to approve the amended bylaws 2 years ago because it read like a seatbelt, not a trap. Everyone agrees on seatbelts until they want to drive with their knees and show off. I checked the seal on the envelope again. Unbroken. I'm not superstitious, but I don't wave a life. Jacket around to scare people away from the deck. You keep it under your chair and hope you never have to touch it. Still, I opened the safe and held the envelope for the weight of it. It is not heavy. Paper is light. Responsibility is the weight. I put it back. Then I called the general counsel. Is the language as clean as we think? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. It's airtight. The clause triggers on humiliation as a management tool, removal of approvals without due process, and coercive succession moves. We have documented patterns. We do, I said. We have the memos? We have the memos, she said, and read me the titles in a voice that kept her feelings neat. Use of public denigration in team settings. Pilot work, outside approved controls. Leadership covenant breach, preliminary review. She stopped. Do you want me to brief governance before the meeting? Send them the packet, I said. No commentary. Let the documents speak. Also send the 2-page summary. Subject line, she asked, practical. Stewardship, not sentiment, I said. I heard her pen scratch it down. The COO texted me a short line that sounded like a hand on a shoulder done right. If there's a vote, I'll speak to execution risk. We can't bleed senior talent. I replied with a single word. Thank you. The fewer words you use on days like this, the truer the ones you choose have to be. I didn't call investors to stage applause. I didn't leak to anyone. I told 2 independent directors the time and place and asked them to read, truly read, the charter they signed when no one was taking photographs. One of them, a former regulator, said, I've been waiting for someone to use this for what it was meant for. The other, a founder herself, said, I don't like surprises. Neither do I replied. That's why we wrote rules. On the floor outside, laughter bubbled and broke like glass dropped in a sink. Ryan walked past once, flanked by 2 managers and a woman from a firm that wants us to pivot faster than a body can without breaking bones. He had his presentation remote in his hand like a baton. We're going to talk velocity, he said, half to them, half to the hallway. The market rewards courage. He looked toward my glass wall and passed it the way a man looks through rain to a tree he has already decided to cut down. See you upstairs, he said, and didn't wait for an answer. The young engineer from the plant, Priya, walked by alone with a binder hugged to her chest. Good luck, sir, she said, then corrected herself. I mean, not luck. You don't need luck. Everyone needs a little, I said. Good work makes luck honest. At 3:40 I stood, took the envelope, the card with 3 lines, and the leather folder with my wife's initials. I hung the shawl over the back of the chair like a flag I didn't need anyone else to salute. The elevator. Ride up to the board floor is 13 seconds. It gives you enough time to think one thought cleanly. Mine was simple. Protect the soul, not the pride. The doors opened to a corridor laid with carpet that eats noise. A junior staffer rushed past carrying a stack of blue folders with the company crest embossed. The board packets, warm from the printer. She nearly tripped when she saw me, recovered, smiled, and kept going. Good. We need people who recover. The boardroom doors were open, the way you leave a theater door open before the curtain to encourage the town to wander in. Inside, water beaded on glass pitchers. Small plates sat at a precise angle next to notepads. The oak gavel we used at our first annual meeting rested in its velvet cradle. I touched the wood with one finger in passing. It felt like the handle of a hammer you have used long enough to know where it will bite and where it will give. Rayon was already there, standing at the head of the table, warming up the room with small jokes about traffic and Mondays pretending to be Fridays. He is good at this part. He has a stage voice designed for microphones and recap videos. The governance chair sat straight as a yardstick. The kind of woman who can silence a room just by flipping to the next page. The former regulator cleaned his glasses with a corner of his tie. The founder director twisted the cap off her pen like she was priming a valve. The CFO claimed he was just checking a calendar on his phone, but his thumb hovered over a chat like a hummingbird over a flower. I took my seat at the side, not at the head. It is an old habit to remind myself the chair is a function, not a throne. Rayon looked over, gave me a smile that would have played better if his eyes had joined it. They didn't. He nodded to the governance chair like a host nods to the piano player, and she tapped the gavel once, not to signal power, but to mark the start of work. "This extraordinary meeting is called to order," she said. Topic: leadership continuity. Rayan launched the deck. He had graphics that moved like a river. He had numbers that sang a tune about total addressable market and brand refresh cycles. He talked fast because fast feels like certainty if you aren't trained to tell the difference. "We need a modern brand face," he said, the line landing on the table like a bright toy. He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. He clicked to a slide titled Succession Readiness and let it sit long enough that the room could pretend the word meant care instead of conquest. "My father deserves rest," he said at the end, turning the sentence into a generous gift he'd already wrapped. A manager near the end of the table coughed to cover an eager nod. Another adjusted a cuff and let his face settle into the expression people wear when they want to be seen as brave at low cost. No one spoke. Silence is not always agreement. Sometimes it is the room remembering how to breathe. The governance chair turned to me. "Would you like to respond?" she asked, voice flat as a level. I took out my wallet, slid the card free, and kept my fingers off the leather folder for one more breath. I have learned to love small sentences because they don't leave you anywhere to hide. "We don't run on faces," I said, my voice even. "We run on principles." I let the air stretch and settle. "Stewardship is not retirement," I said next. "It is responsibility." A muscle jumped in Rayan's jaw and then smoothed the way a wave curls and flattens. I placed the envelope on the table and looked at the independent directors first so they could see there was no surprise inside it. "The Anaya Stewardship Trust hereby exercises its voting rights as defined in the bylaws you all approved," I said. Paper makes a small sound when you slide it across a polished surface. I slid. The independent director lifted the flap, drew out the letter, and read. The other director leaned in. The room shifted from theater to workbench. Rayan laughed, because laughing is a way to outrun the part of your mind that knows the math. "Dad," he said, aiming at humor but hitting the wall just to the left of it. "We're all on the same side here." He didn't look at the governance chair when he said it. Mistake. "We are," I said. "That is why rules exist." He stared at the envelope, then at me, then at the chair. "This is a stunt," he said softly. The word stunt works on stages and in cafeterias. It breaks in rooms where bylaws live. The former regulator didn't look up. "The clause is clean," he said, as if he were checking rain off a gauge. The triggers appear satisfied. The founder director tapped her pen once against the pad. Not impatience, just a metronome. "Let's read the memos," she said. "Let's put facts on the table." The general counsel distributed the packet she had printed for each director. Titles visible, dates precise. Use of public denigration in team settings. The HR summaries didn't use adjectives they couldn't defend. They quoted exact phrases and placed them in rooms with dates. Pilot work, outside approved controls. The operations note included a picture of the color-coded board in the plant with the big word approved and the line of signatures like a spine. Leadership covenant breach, preliminary review. Legal had highlighted the section in the covenant Rayan had signed himself, the part about dignity and process and the promise not to weaponize succession for personal standing. He exhaled through his nose and tried to look bored. Boredom is a poor mask for fear. It cracks at the edges first. The governance chair read, then read again, lips moving the way a person reads a recipe they have to serve to guests who know food. Outside the window, the sky had turned that clear, pale blue that makes glass look colder than it is. Inside, paper rustled like rain. No one reached for water. No one looked at the clock. The room had the specific quiet of people measuring their own part in a thing. I watched faces, not to collect enemies, to collect truth. The CFO's thumb stilled. The manager with the brave at low-cost face kept it, but his eyes slid to the door like he wanted to leave the scene before the photograph. I said nothing more. People think speeches win rooms. Sometimes they do. More often, rooms are won by letting proof breathe until pride runs out of air. Rayan tried a new tone, softer, the tone he used as a boy when he wanted to explain why the vase was broken, and why it wasn't really anyone's fault. "We're trying to be fast," he said. "The market punishes hesitation." The former regulator answered without heat. The market punishes rule-breaking more. The founder director flicked a glance at me that said, "This is why we wrote the second kind of plan." The governance chair turned a page and placed her finger on a paragraph. "Humiliation as a management tool," she read. "Prohibitions apply regardless of familial status." She looked up at him then, finally. "You sign this?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The air had a taste, like the moment before the first drop hits your face and you know you forgot an umbrella. The chair slid the first motion onto the table, like placing a calm hand over a rattling lid. "Motion to call for an immediate vote on the chair," she said, "as provided by the trust under the bylaws." Hands adjusted themselves, pens straightened in fingers. I could feel the old oak gavel in the cradle without touching it, the way a carpenter knows where the hammer is in the dark. I breathed once more, steady, the way my wife told me to, on the balcony when the lake was black glass and the future was a question we would love, even if it hurt. "Motion is on the table," the governance chair said, and in that quiet I could hear the building breathe through its vents. The former regulator cleared his throat, not to speak, but to mark the seconding of the motion with a small nod and the simple word that makes business move: second. Paper sounded like rain again, as pens found the right line on the agenda. You'd think people would rush through moments like this. They don't. The room leaned into the slowness, because slowness is how you keep from breaking things you can't fix later. The chair looked around the table and measured each face as if it were a dial. "Before we vote," she said, "Counsel, please confirm trigger language and notice." General Counsel didn't perform. She read, Bylaw 7.4. Upon a material stewardship threat demonstrated by humiliation as a management method, removal of controls without process, or coercive succession pressure, the Anaya Stewardship Trust may call an immediate vote on the chair and recommend interim containment measures. Notice, requirement is met by trust filing and board packet. Distribution at T-minus 30 minutes or greater. Both conditions are satisfied. She closed her folder and folded her hands. She is not a dramatic woman. That is why I hired her. Rayon leaned forward like he was about to catch a ball and found out it was a stone. "We're going to punish me for being fast," he said, and the word punish came out softer than he meant, like his mouth didn't want to hold it. The COO, who'd once championed him, answered in the same calm tone he uses when a line stalls. "We're going to protect execution. We're bleeding senior talent. We can't afford to train new hires with humiliation and call it culture." The founder director didn't raise her voice. "Humiliation breaks things you can't bill for," she said. "It costs more than it earns." The former regulator pushed his glasses up. "And markets notice what you think they miss." Rayon tried on a smile, then put it down. "You all talk like this is the 1990s, he said, aiming his words at me but glancing off the room. "Brand is face. Face is growth." I answered with the sentence I had promised myself I would not decorate. "We don't run on faces," I said. "We run on principles." The chair looked at me a beat longer than she looked at anyone else, checking for heat. Finding none, she tipped her chin. "All in favor of appointing the current chair for a renewed term of 3 years under the trust?" Hands went up the way good hands do, deliberate, palm steady, no flourish. 1, 2, 5, 8. The CFO took a breath, then raised his too, a half-second late, like a man deciding to step onto a moving walkway. "Opposed?" the chair asked, and 2 hands lifted, one uncertain, one firm. The firm one belonged to a director who likes brave stories about founders being replaced by their children. He'll tell one less of those at dinners now. "Abstentions?" Silence. The chair counted, as if counting mattered more, because the room had already felt the answer. "Motion carries." She took the oak gavel from its cradle and tapped twice, not loud. It sounded like a door closing gently, firm enough to seal, soft enough not to wake a sleeping child. I felt my breath settle into a place that hadn't been empty, just waiting. Rayon's smile disappeared the way a light goes out when the building cuts power, not bulb by bulb, but all at once. A soft flick to dark. He set his presentation remote down as if it burned. He stood as if to speak and couldn't find the beginning of a sentence that wouldn't hurt more than it helped. He looked young suddenly, It is one of the cruel things about truth. It can make even smart men look the age they are. Not today, Rayan, I said, and I made sure my voice was flat, not a knife. You'd be in the way. It wasn't a victory line, it was a safety line. The chair slid the next motion forward with the same even hand. Motion 2. Suspend Mr. Rayan's operating authority, pending independent review of leadership conduct, with interim authority to the COO, and all pilots return to approved control processes. The founder director said, "So moved." The regulator, second. The vote came faster. Hands rose like a tide that already decided. Carried. Legal outline terms. I did not write them, and I said so before anyone asked. I'll recuse from any discipline conditions, I told the room. I am chair, and I am a father. I will not let one role compromise the other. The governance chair nodded once, approving the boundary the way a surveyor approves a line on a map. Review committee will be independent, she said. Outside coach will be offered. Remediation path is possible. She looked at him, not unkind. We are not here to end a person. We are here to end a pattern. Rayan stared at the grain of the table, then at me, then at the window where the river cut a line of light. He has my shoulders. He has his mother's eyes. They were stormy now, and not with tears. He's too proud. But with the kind of pressure a barometer knows before the weather breaks. The governance chair raised a third motion, like a medic raises a bandage. Motion 3. Company-wide communication reaffirming the stewardship charter. Immediate reinstatement of halted approval controls, and directive that dignity is a non-negotiable performance metric. Some people say you can't measure dignity. They've never read a grievance report, never watched turnover spike quietly in teams that joke too sharp. We voted, carried. The chair set the gavel down, as if placing a cup where it belongs. Next steps, council will circulate formal minutes, communications drafts in 1 hour, COO, be ready to brief execution plan in the morning stand-up. She paused. Any other business? There wasn't, not the kind that needed the room. The kind that needed the hallways would walk itself down after. When we stood, the chairs sighed on the carpet like tired animals. People avoided looking at Rayan and at me, the way polite people do when they don't want to be seen choosing sides. The founder director came up to me first. I hate that you had to use it, she said quietly. I'm glad you wrote it. I folded the trust letter back into its envelope and slid it into the leather folder. Seatbelts look better unused, I said, but they look better than a body through glass. The former regulator shook my hand with a grip that said, work, not congratulations. You'll have headwinds in PR, he said. I know, I replied. We'll use the truth to tack. The COO caught my eye and didn't need words. We have fought fires together. This one would burn cleaner than most. Paper and pride, not metal and oil. Rayan waited by the window as the room emptied, hands in pockets like a boy told to wait after class. I stood with him and didn't make him go to me or me to him. We stood side by side, two men, trying to find the shape of a bridge we hadn't built yet. You planned this, he said finally, not a question, almost an accusation, but an accusation wrapped in the thin blanket of awe. We designed this, I corrected. Your mother and I, before we knew who we would need it for. He turned his head just enough that I saw the line of his jaw, the way it set when he was a child trying not to cry. You embarrassed me, he said, and it landed between us like a misplaced nail. No, I said. You embarrassed yourself. I stopped it from becoming culture. He winced. The wince was real. He felt the truth under his skin, and truth stings when it first meets air. In the corridor outside, a junior waited with a stack of blue folders, like a shield. When we passed, she lifted her chin and smiled with all her nerves showing. Good meeting, she said to no one in particular, and to us both. Rayan didn't answer. I thanked her because people who carry paper carry weight for you. In the elevator, he stared at the floor indicator light, the way a man watches the countdown to a thing he can't stop. I'm going to resign, he said, eyes still on the numbers. Control the narrative. I shook my head. Number. You'll go through the review. You'll do the work. You'll have the option to return if you show. You can lead without treating people like they're props. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. You want to make me crawl? I want to make you honest, I said. Honest to the work, honest to the people, honest to yourself. The doors opened at our floor. He didn't step out. "You won today," he said. "I kept the company today," I said. The doors closed between us with a soft hush. Communications drafted a note while the room still remembered the shape of the vote. We don't write memos like slogans. We write them like instructions. The subject line read, "Reaffirming Stewardship." The body said what it needed to say, and not a word more. It named the charter. It named the conduct. It named the process. It didn't name my son. We don't try people in inboxes. It included one line I fought to keep, even though marketing said it had no spark. Dignity is a performance metric. The COO sent a parallel note to managers with 3 bullets. Halt pilots operating outside controls. Reinstate approvals immediately. Report any pressure to bypass process to governance, not your skip manager. HR attached a reminder of reporting lines and protections. This is the boring part. It is also the part that saves you later. I went to the plant because I always go to the plant when the building upstairs feels like a theater that needs airing out. The veteran manager Rayon had sidelined, stood by the line as if he'd never been off it. His shoulders loosened when he saw me coming. "Back on paper," he said with a dry smile. "Back on paper," I agreed, and we both knew paper in this sentence meant record. Accountability, the thing that keeps fingers attached. I told him we were promoting Priya to lead the pilot, approvals and all, with a mentor, not a boss. He looked over at her, where she stood with her binder, and his mouth did something like pride. "She'll run it straight," he said. "She's got the heartbeat." Priya tried to hide her grin and failed. "Sir," she said, and I stopped her with a small wave. "Don't sir the work," I said. "Lead it." Back upstairs, my office had collected 3 kinds of messages on the glass like rain. Sympathy and careful handwriting from people who remember the garage, silence from people who don't know where to stand yet, and one-liners from people who love a winner. I wiped none of them away. Let the glass tell its story for a day. The cake on the side table looked tired. I closed the box and slid it toward the trash. Before I pushed the lid down, I cut a thin slice and put it on a paper plate. I carried it to the security guard, who checks badges after hours with a joke about being the last line of defense. "From me," I said, "for what you keep from getting to us." He laughed, eyes crinkling. "I prefer chocolate," he said. "So do I," I replied. "Next time?" PR pinged with questions that read like they were written by a room, not a person. Rumors of leadership shakeup? Generational transition or crisis? I answered, with a sentence that would work in a headline and a footnote. We affirmed our charter and strengthened execution. When they pushed for names, we declined. We don't sell our people for clicks. What sells now will cost later. A partner firm's associate who'd been friendly to Rayon wrote a note that tried to sound neutral and landed in fear. Given today's events, we will pause active conversations. I wrote back a one-line thank you for the update. You don't chase people who are already running. Recruiters who had been whispering fancy roles to him went quiet. The market doesn't punish speed. It punishes the wrong kind. In the late afternoon, while the river outside turned from silver to a strip of dull metal, HR came with a draft of the remediation plan. It wasn't punishment. It was work, outside coaching, 360 feedback with teeth instead of gums. A set of observable behaviors, no public put-downs, no bypassing approvals, no jokes that hide sharp edges under a laugh. A 6-month timeline, clear gates, measured in real things, retention, defect rates, satisfaction that you can't fake without the floor calling you out. Legal asked if I wanted to review language. I shook my head. I'll sign off on the structure, not the specifics, I said. He's my son. I won't write the rules he has to live under. That's your job. That's the committee's job. Governance appreciated the line and circled it, metaphorically. Boundaries save families as well as firms. Rayon sent a message at 5:22. I declined the IGI remediation plan. I'll submit resignation terms. He used a period after each sentence, like he wanted to make sure nothing could bleed into the next word. I didn't answer right away. I walked the length of the hall to the window and watched the road below take people home to dinners that would taste like love or like routine, depending on who was at the table. Then I wrote back, I won't accept a resignation tonight. Sleep. Read the plan tomorrow. If you still decline, we'll accept with terms tied to non-disparagement, ongoing coaching for your team, and a clean handover. This isn't about punishment, it's about repair. The three dots appeared, then disappeared. He didn't answer. At 6:10, his wife texted me, a short, careful line that carried more weight than the entire day's agenda. "We need time." I read it twice. I typed back, "You have it. Tell me what you need from me that doesn't harm the company." She replied with a "thank you and nothing else," which is more than most people give when the tide is coming in too fast. I took the shawl from the chair and folded it neatly, the way she would have, as if neatness could steady a day. I slipped it into the drawer and closed it gently, not to hide it, but to keep it from air that had been cut on too many sharp words. Night crews started humming on the lower floors. The office changed key from the daytime major to a low minor that belongs to cleaners and security and the last few who love the quiet enough to buy more of it. I walked back down to the plant because I wanted to end where things are made. Priya's team had the board half filled out already. Approvals initialed in ink that looked like small flags. The veteran manager showed me the fix again, this time with the paperwork pinned beside it, as if to say, "This is how you talk to the future. One change, one signature at a time." I signed where it asked for chair review and wrote a small note beneath my name that said, "Proud of this. Teach 3 others tomorrow." He nodded, and pride moved across his face like a quiet tide. On the way back, I passed the founder's wall. A new hire stood there, phone in hand, taking a picture of the garage photo. He looked at me, looked back at the photo, and laughed softly the way you laugh when you see the origin story and the person who lived it on the same day. "Is that really you?" he asked. "It was," I said. "It still is on good days." He asked me what we ate after that photo. "Bad pizza," I said. "Best thing I ever tasted." He laughed again, and I felt something in the middle of my chest lift. Not triumph, not even relief, just the simple lightness that comes when a day you dreaded tells you it will not ruin you. I returned to my office and found the cake box gone. Someone had taken it. Good. Let the sugar find sweeter mouths. I sat, opened the leather folder, and slid the trust letter back into its place. I locked the safe. I wrote a note to myself on a yellow pad in the crooked handwriting my wife teased me about. "Seatbelt used. Replace it with care." Then I wrote 3 names: the veteran manager, Priya, and the junior receptionist who kept the chaos sorted and didn't know she was running the first gate of our castle. I would thank them properly tomorrow, not with cake, but with raises and paths. And I wrote one more name, Rayon. Beside it, I wrote 2 words: offer grace. Grace is not weakness. Grace is a bridge you build and leave, standing even if the person refuses to cross it. The night smelled like lemon cleaner and a little bit of oil. Somewhere down the hall, a vacuum hummed a steady note. The river outside had turned black, a strip of glass laid over the road. I closed my eyes and saw the balcony and the shawl and my wife's hand on my hair. "Breathe," she had said. I breathed. Morning made the glass look innocent again. That's what light does after a storm. It pretends nothing ever happened. I came in early, before the floors filled, before the screens woke. The night crew had left the smell of lemon and quiet. I watered the plant from my own cup, set the leather folder back in the safe, and wrote out a small list in my crooked hand. Raise for reception. Title and raise for Priya. Reinstate plant manager fully. Draft thank you notes. Lunch on the floor. No speeches. Outside, the river wore a thin ribbon of gold, like it had decided to start over too. I touched the shawl and folded it across the chair, not to clutch, but to honor the person who taught me that starting over is not the same as pretending. People trickled in with the morning, the receptionist whose smile always arrives before her coat is off, the guard who salutes with 2 fingers like a friendly soldier, the intern who keeps walking too fast because he thinks speed means purpose. I handed the receptionist a card with a raise number that would change the look of her grocery bill. "You held the gate yesterday," I said. She blinked twice, then laughed the sound people make when a weight they had been carrying quietly drops without bruising their toes. The COO joined me by the coffee machine. No performance, just a nod that said, "We'll keep it steady." HR emailed the final version of the remediation plan, and the governance chair approved the wording with 2 edits so small and so careful, I wanted to put her name on the wall, just for her commas. At 8:13 a.m., the message came from Rayon. It was 6 words that had been waiting in his thumbs since last night. I will resign. Send the terms. There was no dad. There was no chairman. There was the edge you use when you can't tell if you're cutting rope or your own palm. I read it once. I stood. I left my phone on the desk because replies sent from glass rooms often sound like glass. I took the stairs down one flight where the hallway feels like a spine, bones and light and no place to hide, and walked it until the carpet told me I had reached the end of the polite. A world, then I turned back and went to him. He was in a small conference room that still smelled like new paint, blinds half closed against a sun that had already decided to be honest. He had a brown envelope on the table, keys, an access card, the little silver pin HR gives new leaders with the logo on it. He had stacked them the way he stacks his cutlery at restaurants, neat, precise, like order will save him. He didn't stand. He didn't need to. We were past theater. I'm resigning, he said, flat, as if each letter had been chiseled on stone and he was tired of hearing the strike. I won't do a public dance for a council. I won't sit for your coaches. It's beneath me. He looked older than yesterday, and younger, both at once, the way people look when the mask and the face are arguing. I took the chair opposite him and watched the dust in the light settle like new snow. It's not beneath you, I said. It is the work you skipped while you ran ahead for applause. He flinched the way a person flinches at cold water. You humiliated me in front of the board, he said. No, I said. I let the rules stand in front of both of us. He pushed the envelope an inch across the table with one finger. If I leave now, I control the narrative. Narratives don't save you, I said. Habits do. We sat with the truth like it was a third person in the room. The blinds moved a little in the vent's breath, a quiet hand smoothing nothing. Do you know what your mother said to me the night we changed the bylaws? I asked. He looked away, which is progress of a sort. She said, make the rules strong enough that they can hold even when it hurts us. She didn't say them, she said us. She loved you more than light. She loved this place because she loved the people in it. She asked me to weave both loves together. I tried. Yesterday the weave held. He shook his head like the words were rain he wanted to step out of. You had this planned, he said again, softer. We had a seatbelt planned, I said. You drove too fast. He gave me a look I used to see when he was 11 and got caught cutting a corner on homework he was smart enough not to cut. Pride and shame, wrestling, pride, losing, but not giving up yet. He held his breath, let it out, and reached for the envelope. Send me the papers, clean separation, I'll sign the non-disparagement. You can keep your charter. I didn't take the envelope. You can still choose the hard path that keeps doors open, I said. 6 months, coaches, 360, measured behavior, not pretty words. If you pass, you come back through a door you built yourself by changing. He smiled without joy. You want to make me kneel. I want to show you where the ground is. It's steadier than the stage. Silence pooled. He picked up the envelope. He stood. Goodbye, Dad, he said, and the word Dad landed like a plate, set down gently so it wouldn't break. He left. The door's whisper behind him felt like winter sneaking under a window frame. I looked at his chair, and for a second, I saw his mother's hand there, smoothing a wrinkle in the fabric that didn't exist. Legal prepared the acceptance letter with terms as clean as glass. No press statements with names. Handover of projects to the COO's office. Continued coaching made available even outside the company if he wanted it. Non-disparagement both ways. Neutral references that told the truth without salt. Governance signed. I signed last, not because I enjoyed the line, but because I wanted to make sure my hand was steady. We are ending a role, the chair said in the meeting where we approved the paperwork. A career ends only if a person chooses not to turn. She looked at me and added, the door for the person stays open. That sentence will never make the news. It will live only in the way our managers talk to the next young leader who forgets that a pilot without approvals is a cliff without a railing. PR drafted a sentence for the outside world that you could read quickly at a traffic light and not hate yourself for. We reaffirmed our stewardship charter and are focused on execution and dignity. Markets blinked, then faced forward, as markets do when you show them calm instead of drama. The stock ticked down a little at lunch because rumor makes money when truth is slow, then ticked back up by close when operations shipped on time and the plant hit its cycle count, with fewer defects and more smiles that reached eyes. A partner firm that had paused, wrote back to unpause, surprised at how boring our stability looked on paper. Boring is a compliment you don't clap for. You bank it. At noon, I took sandwiches to the R&D floor. No speech. I ate at a high table with Priya and two techs who speak in wires and diagrams and poetry when they think they are only speaking in torque. Priya explained the approval board like it was a language she was proud to teach. You could feel the team's shoulders raising themselves from a hunch they didn't know they had learned. The veteran manager told a story about a flood year when he slept on a cot in the tool cage and woke every hour to walk the line, a father checking on sleeping children. The room laughed when he said he'd learned to call every tool by a nickname before he knew the names of his neighbor's dogs. Things respond better when we treat them like they're seen, he said. People do too. We all knew he wasn't talking about wrenches anymore. In the afternoon, I called the two institutional investors who have been with us since the days when our office carpets were rentals. I told them what we did. No drama, no thesis, just facts and the charter. They asked two questions that told me they read reports and people equally. Is the line holding, and are the good ones staying? I said yes to both and gave names. They said, good, and moved on to a new procurement the way professional grown-ups do. I wrote a note to Anaya's file. Yes, I keep one. Yes, I read it when I need to remember I can be better. The rules held. The tone held. The company breathed. You were right about the soul. The shawl on my chair made the office feel like a place a person could come home to. Ryan didn't come back that day. He didn't call. HR confirmed the paperwork reached him, and that he read it and that he typed, received. In the evening, his wife sent me 2 lines. He's angry. I'm tired. Thank you for not making this a show. I wrote back, I love you both. Tell me what you need that doesn't hurt the work. There was a long pause across the little blue bubbles. Then, space. We'll call you when the house is quiet. I put the phone face down and let the quiet of my own office teach me that love and leadership share one skill, learning to sit with what you cannot fix today without breaking what might heal tomorrow. Days passed in the clean way. Days passed when a company knows its task. We set dignity as a metric in performance reviews, not a slogan, a score with teeth, coached by people who understand that kindness is not softness. The plant numbers smoothed out. The safety board kept its run of green. Turnover in the team that had learned to laugh like knives fell by half. Priya trained 3 people, just like the note I wrote under the line, and I signed a 4th promotion because momentum is a language too, and you should speak it when it says build. The receptionist, her name is Sadaf, and it matters that I say it in my mouth and not just in my head, started bringing a small plant to the front desk because she said the leaves made people kinder. I told her we would measure that in smiles and see if it held. Once the dust settled, the board formalized my renewed term as chair. We did it without a town hall, without a victory lap, without photos of me pretending to be surprised. I refused any portrait bigger than the one already on the wall with the rest of us in the garage, all of us younger than our ideas. I issued one short internal line. We lead by charter. We build by process. We protect by dignity. Now, back to work. The message got fewer emojis than the product launches. Good. Save fireworks for fireworks. Save work for working. On a Saturday, I drove to the lake because sometimes the city makes too much noise, and the water knows how to tell me the truth without words. The air smelled like pine and old memory. I brought the shawl, folded in the passenger seat, because a ritual can be a raft. I sat on the old bench and wrote a letter to Anaya I will never send, because the person who needed it was sitting there with my pen, not the person beneath the soft earth. I wrote, we built something that outlasts us. It kept the soul this week. It hurt, and it healed things I can't see yet. He resigned, not because I pushed him, but because he could not yet. Bear the work that would make him the man we both know is still somewhere behind his pride. If he ever turns, the door is open. If he doesn't, I will hold the door anyway. I will not let bitterness move into the room where love lives. I said your name in the boardroom on a day when paper felt like weather. I said it not out loud, but inside, like a compass. It pointed me where I had to go. The lake winked once in a way that made me think she had just rolled her eyes at my handwriting. On Monday, a rumor crawled in that a rival firm had called Rayon and then called me separately to ask for a reference. I told them the truth. He is brilliant at stage setting, I said. He is fast. He has not yet learned how to keep people whole while he runs. The person on the line cleared his throat the way people do when they wanted a yes and got a mirror instead. Would you hire him back? He asked. If he did the work, I said. If he learned to treat dignity as a metric. If he apologized without a camera pointed at him. Silence, a pen, a scribble. The call ended with politeness and no promise. I sat with that too, not as a victory, but as a weather report. Partly cloudy, chance of sun if he carries an umbrella for once. The day the severance letter came back signed, HR pinged me with the completed workflow notice that always feels like a hospital machine, beeping its cheerful little compliance song. I stared at the screen and felt an ache I would not name. In the afternoon, I walked the founder's wall and watched a couple of new hires trace fingers along faces they didn't know yet. That one, a young man said, tapping the frame where I looked 25 and terrified. He looks like he just lied to a bank in a good way. I laughed. I told the bank the truth, I said. I just told it louder than my fear. He asked if the garage smelled like hope. Like dust and sugar, I said, and he made a face and said that sounded like hope to him. My heart lifted in the middle, like bread making peace with heat. In the evening, after most of the building went home to dinners that would taste like relief or routine, I sat at my desk and read the charter again, start to finish, like a prayer. Then I closed it and wrote a note to the team, not fancy, just a human paragraph. Thank you for building in the days when building also meant mending. Thank you for steady hands and straight talk. Thank you for kindness that doesn't ask for a camera. Tomorrow, we make more things. Let's make them right. I sent it. Replies came back in the little ways that matter. Thumbs up, a smiley from a welder who never uses 2 emojis when one will do. A single line from the finance lead who stirred an empty cup that morning. I needed this. So did I. Before I left, I turned off the light and stood with the shawl in my hand one more time, the fabric soft and smarter than I am. I could almost hear her, as I have always heard her, when the room is just quiet enough. Don't mistake winning for keeping. Keep what matters. We kept something this week, not a title, not a stage. We kept the soul. It cost me, and it cost him more, and it will cost us again because anything worth building charges interest. I can pay it. I was built to pay it. I locked the safe, set the key in its place, and took the elevator down through a building that felt more like itself than it had in a long time. If you've walked with me to this last line, tell me where you are. Bus, couch, night shift break. If this story made you feel something about work, about family, about rules that keep people whole, then do one small thing that helps it travel, like share, comment, and subscribe.